Warning: this video contains depictions of violence, racial imagery, and racial slurs. Viewer discretion is advised.
Video games have come a long way out of their infancy to depict stories that cinema, novels, or graphic novels really couldn't. And thankfully, we're getting out of the headspace that video games, their stories model everything they do after blockbuster cinema. But I digress. An advantage that video games have is that you are in the shoes of the protagonist. Everything that they experience is what you experience. And that allows developers to make you experience horrible things that otherwise you couldn't really experience in other forms of art.
When Wolfenstein: The New Order was in the works, the developers wanted the players to feel the toll of sacrificing one of your two war buddies by having the player choose who Death's Head would perform his experiment on. In Dark Souls, you can end the lives of every NPC you lay your eyes on and make an already dying world feel more desolate. And Undertale was practically marketed word of mouth for its ability to make the player feel consequences for basic RPG gameplay.
Going back to Wolfenstein, one of its most disturbing levels was an entire concentration camp that BJ suffers inside. Video games have the ability to show us these disturbing things and make us experience it. But in all my years playing games, I have not yet played a game where you experience the racism that disenfranchised persons of color experience. Which is why in this video I would like to discuss Mafia III, to praise its story, its attempt at depicting racism of the 60s, and to criticize its middling gameplay.
With traditional Southern values.
I underestimated how far he was going to go. What he was willing to do.
Visit the historic French Ward and enjoy local cuisine at one of our 5-star restaurants.
Killing them wasn't enough. Lincoln Clay was using them to send a message.
Or spend the afternoon in the bayou and take in its natural splendor.
Sal Marcano had no idea what he was going to unleash.
New Bordeaux. Safe, family-oriented fun. Make it your next vacation destination.
This city survived the War of 1812, the Civil War, and God knows how many hurricanes. But when Lincoln Clay went after the mob, he inflicted more damage than all the wars and hurricanes combined. Well, today, I'm sure the file on Vito's skeleton is about 3 feet thick, but that wasn't always the case.
The Mafia series started out all the way back nearly 2 decades ago with 2002's Mafia, originally developed by Czech developer Illusion Softworks, followed up with 2010's Mafia II, though they now called themselves 2K Czech before they were merged with Hangar 13 Studios. The Mafia series is noteworthy as games inspired by the Grand Theft Auto series, though they strive for more realism in their series. Mafia 2 is also noteworthy for having the most fucks in a video game. And by fucks, I mean the word, not the act.
Fuck you. Motherfucker!
Though I am curious as to what game has the most fucks in it.
Mafia III was released on October 7th, 2016, and found financial success, but was also met with mixed reception. Praise for the game starts and usually ends with its story, a conclusion Marty Silva came, but a lot of criticism was focused on the gameplay as shown in Yahtzee Crowshaw's review. I came across the game during a Black Friday sale and, played it on a whim, and I really enjoyed the game and have wanted to talk about this game for years, and I'm really excited to talk about it. And what I really would like to discuss, its story and its depiction of racism.
The year is 1968, a time marked by both the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War. Lincoln Clay has just come back to his adopted family, his brother Ellis and foster father Sammy Robinson, leader of the Black Mob. Lincoln is welcomed by his family and friends, but as he discusses with Father James, he doesn't plan on staying long and only came back to say goodbye before he left for California to work at a shipyard. That all falls through when he helps Sammy to deal with the HEXEN gang that's been giving him trouble, and when he's summoned by Sal Marcano, the head of the Marcano crime family and the leader of New Bordeaux's criminal underworld. At the country club, Sal pitches to Lincoln a heist that would rob New Bordeaux's bank of $6 million in cash, which would equal roughly $47 million in today's money. Though Lincoln is enthusiastic about helping with Marcano's scheme, he refuses Sal's offer for Lincoln to run the Hollow out of loyalty for Sammy. Though the heist has a few bumps in the road, Lincoln, Ellis, Georgie Marcano, and Danny Burke manage to escape the police with all of the cash and present it to Sal Marcano.
You know something, Lincoln? You're possibly the baddest motherfucker I ever laid my eyes on. You shouldn't have said no.
There, Georgie and his father betray their allies and murder Ellis, Danny, and Sammy after shooting Lincoln in the head. They burn down Sammy's bar and leave him for dead. Only Father James pulling him out of the fire saves him. After a few months of recovery, Lincoln swears revenge on Sal Marcano, promising to bring down his entire organization, so he could feel the same pain Lincoln felt.
I know what Sal did to you, Lincoln. But nothing you do will bring any of them back.
This isn't about bringing them back, or even exacting some street justice. It's about making that bastard feel what it's like to lose everything. Watch as I take it all away from him.
Enlisting his friend, CIA operative John Donovan, and with Father James urging him against, Lincoln begins a campaign to make New Bordeaux his, taking every district from the Marcanos with the assistance of criminal leaders Cassandra, Thomas Burke, and Vito Scaletta of the Haitian, Irish, and Italian gangs respectively. The game is a fairly standard revenge plot, with Lincoln Clay's primary motivation is the fall of Sal Marcano. Revenge stories are nothing new to video games, and Lincoln's motivation isn't groundbreaking, but I personally find the outright selfish reasoning to seek vengeance to be a particularly inspiring moment, writing-wise. His desire not to get revenge to feel better, but to make Sal hurt just as much as he did, if not worse. This selfish desire sets him apart from other protagonists, even those of the same genre like Grand Theft Auto. While the trio of GTA 5 were anti-heroes and their motivations were self-serving, they ultimately did what they did for the betterment of their friends, family, and themselves. While you could say that him helping out his lieutenants is for their benefit, Lincoln seems to see it as just a side effect.
There's one thing that I can't say about Lincoln Clay that I particularly like, is that it's ambiguous whether or not Lincoln is attempting to kill Sal Marcano for entirely revenge purposes. Like no doubt in my mind he wants to kill Sal Marcano for murdering his entire family. But I think a part of that is he wanted what he found in Vietnam back. We aren't really told a lot about what Lincoln's experiences at Vietnam were, but they certainly were traumatic. But I like to think that the camaraderie that Lincoln found, he wanted that back. And through killing Sal Marcano and going a campaign against him, that's exactly what he's doing to have that experience back. Another interesting thing about Lincoln Clay is that his heritage and how people react to his skin color is actually a part of the game's mechanics.
Used to be people knew their place. Now everybody's screaming about equality. And now they all deserve a slice of the pie. Niggers, mix, gooks, you name it. Our way of doing things won't work in a world like that.
Racism in the southern United States is so widespread that some people even treat them as if they are synonymous with each other. And depending on what state or town you're in, that rings very true. Don't stop in Vidor if you're in Texas. And this game is depicted in the 1960s when the civil rights movement was happening, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and the Vietnam War was happening. The developers felt like if they did not attempt to depict the racism that was happening during that time period, it would be doing a disservice to the people who suffered during that time of bigotry. Multiple characters are racist towards Lincoln Clay and other black characters. The police are always suspicious of Lincoln Clay no matter what he's doing. And in fact, there are several places in the game where Lincoln is not allowed inside. No coloreds allowed.
There's a minor moment in the game's prologue when Lincoln meets Georgie at the country club. A couple walks past and the woman pulls her purse to her chest. It's an understated moment, as while she's front and center for the audience, for Lincoln this reaction from white people to his presence is so commonplace that he doesn't comment or notice it. It's unabashed with showing that what the world was like at that time period, even reflecting how parts of our current culture still face these issues. Throughout the game, a radio show called Native Son, where Remy Duval, wealthy businessman and clan leader, goes on tirades against the civil rights movement, barely containing his racism. In one broadcast, he and the police chief discuss how the colored folks must be guided with a strong hand, and in necessary times, they must strike at them with a stern fist.
All right, well, does this mean more attention on Negro crime?
Well, let me put it this way. Same way a farm animal needs pardon to go the direction you needed to go, the Negroes must be guided with a firm hand, and that hand must not be afraid to be raised if the situation calls for it.
In another broadcast, he and a senator discuss how books that depict the South as villains who antagonize the black folk. They straight up say that while the First Amendment gives people the right to say these ideas about racial history, they should have the right to protect their children from bad ideas.
Now, I think this book, The Confessions of Nat Turner by William Styron, I don't know. We got to that argument by some of our more liberal constituents that this filth should be taught in our schools.
Well, they claiming it's their First Amendment right to teach it.
Yeah, well, the First Amendment allows us freedom of speech, but it doesn't mean we're obligated to expose our young people to this kind of trash.
Exactly.
Now, parents should have more say on the matter than some teacher or East Coast educated bureaucrat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially books that teach such self-loathing and revulsion for the people of the South.
I was playing a 5-year-old game set in the 60s, foreshadowing conservative talking points about critical race theory in the year of 2021.
I play video games to escape, man. Another pretty egregious example is when Lincoln is masquerading as a waiter, and he has to deal with an extremely racist manager who is black. Here's some clips.
Lazy nigga. That's their job. Can't stand a lazy nigga. Nothing low on the face of God's earth.
'Cause if it was up to me, I'd unleash the hound and turn y'all niggas into puppet child. I was happy at the back of the bus.
Big old man dingo nigga.
Okay, enough of that.
Oh, he's probably one of the good ones.
But at its most horrifying, you find the upper echelons of the city bidding to own a human life. You can listen to the auctioneer rattle off higher and higher numbers as the man being sold curses them all. It should come as no surprise that it's the Klan themselves running this atrocious auction, and that Lincoln doesn't spare the men behind it all. A number of the characters either have racist tendencies or are racist themselves. The main antagonist, Sal Marcano, was openly racist towards black people, Irish, East Asian, I'm gonna run out of fingers if I keep going, and his motivation is to get out of a coming criminal underworld where he won't be able to exploit minorities, some of whom might even rival him. A number of his associates are just as liberal at using slurs, but using racial slurs isn't exclusive to the antagonists. Quite a few of Lincoln's allies aren't shy of using derogatory terms, even using terms I had no idea were derogatory.
Now fuck off. Vulgar chalky postures once already. Look where that got me.
Even Lincoln isn't above using Vietnamese and Italian slurs. It paints an interesting picture of the 60s in sharp contrast to our current year. Nowadays, if a character is depicted using racial slurs or having racist tendencies, that's a quick way to let the audience know they're ignorant or antagonistic. But in Mafia, despite the fact that these characters are like that, they're still on the side of good, or the side of being the protagonists.
Mafia 3 wants to show you that in this era of America, this is how it was, that even characters who are on the morally side of good can still be racist. This is to show either a parallel of how today's culture is parallels with the culture of the 60s, or just to show how the world of the 60s was.
Being a video game, Mafia 3 grants the player to indulge in catharsis. I mean, this is a game where you can raid the Ku Klux Klan and massacre those crackers. In fact, throughout my playtime, I often decided whether or not to lethally kill someone if they were being racist or not. Leftist agenda, am I right? And when going against the Southern Union, I made it a point to leave no Klansmen alive when I disrupted their activities. When Lincoln goes against neo-Confederates who've taken over the Hollow, he kills their leader by lynching him on a Ferris wheel. When you go against a racket boss who deals with selling human beings, Lincoln executes him without a second's thought.
Now do whatever you want, just don't kill me.
But what I want is for you to die.
This game, much like the blaxploitation genre that it takes inspiration from, allows the player/viewer to vicariously take revenge against those who made it their goal in life to hate you for the color of your skin. It's why one of the progenitors of blaxploitation is 1966, The Black Klansman, and how Black Dynamite, despite being a parody of that genre, still embodies this aspect, especially with Black Dynamite's ending speech after defeating Richard Nixon.
Of course, someone might argue whether or not it's healthy for art to depict someone of differing opinion being harmed or killed. And to that I say...
What? It's Pepe's become kind of a...
It's the hard knock life for us. Stand treated.
While this portrayal of racism is valuable for a work of art, it is also incredibly valuable to be diverse with characters, and Mafia III delivers as well. There's African Americans represented by Father James and the Black Mob, Haitians by Cassandra and Emmanuel, Cubans by Alma and Alvarez, several Irish Americans like Burke and his son, and a non-antagonistic portrayal of an Italian American with Vito. There's also Nikki Burke, who reveals to you if you do enough missions for her that she's in a relationship with a woman.
I've been seeing someone. Her name's Darlene. Meant to tell you earlier. You gonna say something?
Take it that's why Burke's been so hard on you.
Dan'd always stick up for me. But he's not here anymore.
No, he ain't.
So where do you come down on it?
I've never had much of anything, or anyone, and what little I did have was taken away from me. So if there's someone out there, it'll make a difference to me who it is.
Even Lincoln Clay is unique in that he's biracial. Early in the game, Father James explains that his mother was Dominican and his father was white, with James suggesting that he might have been Italian. Lincoln Clay is one of the very few biracial characters in video games, and I think that's something to highlight. Diversity is a word that's passed around a lot in gaming, and the art form has taken many strides toward diversifying itself. Women are often playable characters, and there are several games where you play as black characters. Grand Theft Auto V is one of the most successful video games ever released, and Franklin Clinton is one of its 3 protagonists. His predecessor, Carl C.J. Johnson, was once praised as one of the best written characters in gaming, and Alex Vance is the star of likely the best VR game ever made. However, there are still steps needed to be taken. Lincoln Clay is a biracial, but he's only one of the few biracial characters you can play as. The others are the aforementioned Alex and Victor Vance of Vice City Stories. For Mexican playable characters, there are certainly a few notable examples like Sombra from Overwatch, and Sasha and Juan from Drinkbox Studios' Severed and Guacamelee. The native tribes have Connor from Assassin's Creed. For Jewish people, there's BJ Blazkowicz, who's ethnically Jewish on his mother's side. And for queer characters, while I've played a fair few, namely Life is Strange, I've yet to play a game with the main character being a gay man. Yes, I know about gay Tony. Or being trans, pansexual, or intersex, or asexual.
Well, it is true that all of this is still a lot better than how games have been depicted before. These are still just a few great steps towards adequate representations for all people. Gaming is for everyone, and it should represent everyone who plays them.
Paul Lincoln! Bienvenue à la maison!
Paul Lincoln! Bienvenue à la maison! Now, as you can tell, I've gone through many links to discuss Mafia III and how it depicts its racism, and I feel that it is important. However, the biggest thing that I could say about Mafia III and be critical about it is that it's not about racism.
Yes, despite all of the time we've spent discussing all the links that Mafia III goes into depicting how racist the southern United States is, it's ultimately not center stage. What is a story about revenge. It's about Lincoln Clay wanting to exact his rage at Sal Marcano, dismantling everything he has built in front of him before he goes in for the kill. And you can argue that this is a story about dismantling the system of oppression, which is true. The mob are a bubble of power with control over the city, but the game isn't about dismantling the systems of systemic racism. And though there are moments where you are limiting perpetrators of the system, again, the clan slaughter and when you assassinate a judge, however, the radical effects that they have are secondary to Lincoln's intention to kill Sal Marcano. It's very easy to say that a story about fighting for the civil rights movement is a lost opportunity, and I do feel that that's the case. A game that was about the civil rights movement could both elevate the medium as an art form, and it could represent those events in history. Although, I'm not sure how that would turn out, but I'm certain there's someone out there that could deliver that video game. Everything that human beings can imagine is possible in reality. The other issue is a question posed by an article I read by Chris Plante for The Verge that I recommend you read if you're interested in Mafia 3 or if you're interested in the dichotomy of story-driven video games. Does the open-world, GTA-inspired gameplay of Mafia 3 hamper its message on racism? Though Mafia 3 wants you to live in a world where you are a disenfranchised, racially discriminated black man, while at the same time presenting a power fantasy video game.
Here, the joyless white dude underdog, murdering everything in his path with minimal justification, is replaced by a black man getting revenge on the embodiments of a history of injustices. With its setting, the South in 1968, Mafia 3 has the opportunity to show how black men and women weren't treated as people. But how can a game comment on the value of human life when it treats every person as a target waiting to be shot?
It's an unfortunate implication and not one that the developers intended. My only argument against it is that you're not encouraged to shoot pedestrians and you can choose not to kill who you wish. But that brings in a much bigger question. How can you treat a narrative seriously when the player just slaughtered an entire precinct of police officers, a platoon of National Guard soldiers, and huge swaths of people? How can it expect me to care about my main character's life when it doesn't want me to respect the lives of everyone in this world? Grand Theft Auto has had this problem for years, exemplified with each game that strives for more realism. I am not going to attempt to answer those questions because they can be videos of their own, but it's something to think about if you like discussing games as an art form.
Well, I have been utilizing a lot of research into black history and black perspectives on Mafia 3. My perspective is only my own, and arguably isn't the perspective that should be highlighted or important. So before we close out this segment and go into the gameplay, I want to highlight a few reviews that I found while researching for this video. The Black Hokage made a video where he said that the Mafia 3 was the wokest game of the year, and even went as far as to say it was like a life simulator to him, but he criticized the gameplay and said that the developers probably focused more on the world and story rather than the gameplay. He basically made all the points I ended up making, only he could dust it into 7 minutes. Steve Daniels of the Black Nerd Problems came to a similar conclusion and praised the game for giving every mission narrative reasoning. James Crosby of The Medium wrote an article where he praised the game for depicting his race, but also raised the question if Lincoln Clay is a problematic protagonist. His article was a fantastic read and helped a lot during my research, and I encourage you to read it if you're interested in this game. I will say this one thing though. While researching for this video, I was trying to find black reviewers and journalists to see their thoughts on the game, and I thought it would be incredibly easy to do, but no, it was not, and it really highlights how the game industry and its medium still need to take some steps, because I thought it would be easy, but no, it was not. Just a bit. But to close out this segment of the game's depiction of racism, I want to highlight one last aspect of the game. Now, there is a pirate radio station called The Hollow Speaks. The Hollow Speaks is a contrast to Native Son. You know, while Remy Duval often appalls and annoys me with the schlock that he constantly says on the radio, reminding me of Fucker Carlson, I often find myself very interested and intrigued by what The Hollow Speaks has to say, and when I was playing the game, I would stop at the side of the road to listen in. The DJ behind it will bring up issues, usually around black power and race issues. For example, he'll criticize the police chief of New Bordeaux for saying that black people are children that need to be, kept in line and stuff like that. He'll talk about Remy Duval's actions as a leader of the Southern Union. He'll talk about how when 2 black men are murdered, he predicts that their crimes are going to be highlighted as justification for their murder. Does that remind you of anyone? And he'll even bring up how, despite the fact that black people make up about 20% of New Bordeaux, they represent 60% of New Bordeaux's prison population. The Hollow Speaks is what we in the business call based and red-pilled. For the final broadcast that he does, The Hollow Speaks, this DJ goes on about how, despite the fact that he wants the country to improve and how much he really believes that it can, he ultimately is hopeful that it ever will be. So he urges that the youth of this country to take the mess that the adults are leaving them with and make a better world out of it. He is then arrested on live broadcast. The Hollow Speaks, I think, is the very best that Mafia 3 offers in that trying to bring up black issues and discussing them. It's the one part of the game I will defend the most, and I think a lot of attention was brought to it, and it's excellent.
That's all we got, New Bordeaux. So hang tight and remember, when the holler speaks, you better listen.
That's far enough, you wop asshole! What the fuck, Lou? Take another step and he gets you. You think I give a shit about some politician? Please, I don't even know what's going on.
The story and its depiction of racism are ultimately this game's biggest assets, and it's the acting that really carries all of it and delivers it so well. The past two generations have really bridged the gap between motion pictures and video games, and Mafia 3 definitely benefits from that bridge.
Most of the actors in Mafia gave exemplary performances. Most of the performances are from television and stage actors that often haven't seen a great limelight. The acting feels more low-key than in other big-budget performances, where you can easily recognize an actor's voice. Highlights include Jay Aquafone. He's able to flawlessly portray Sal Marcano as a jolly, cordial man who can instantly flip into a ruthless, cutthroat bastard, all at the flip of a dime. But Barry O'Rourke and Gordon Green practically pour their souls into their performances as Thomas Burke and Father James respectively. A scene in particular with Burke where he and Lincoln are discussing business. Burke, for what is probably the only time in his life, lets go and vents about himself, cursing that he pushes everyone away, even if they want to love and help him.
Things get taken from us. We convince ourselves we have to go out and inflict the pain on someone else. A little mend what's busted up inside of us. But it doesn't. No.
It done.
Spent my entire goddamn life scratching and clawing at anyone that came along. Even if they were there to help. Look where it fucking got me.
But Gordon Green spends every scene pouring himself into his character, trying to either reconcile or regret all that he had with Lincoln Clay. He knows what Lincoln has done is wrong, but he often wonders and debates with himself and Lincoln, wondering if it was Lincoln's fault for doing what he did, or the world around him. And depending on how you play, he'll either think Lincoln couldn't accept the world for what it is, or regret ever pulling him out of the fire.
If all you ever look for is evil, it's all you ever gonna see. I never wanted this for you, Lincoln. I wanted you to have a good life.
But on the opposite end of the spectrum, Lane Compton is absolutely hilarious. He pulls off the sleazy, corrupt CIA agent and makes every scene a joy to watch. Many of the game's funniest moments come from him, and the chemistry Donovan and Lincoln have is excellent. One of my favorite scenes in the game comes from when Lincoln enters Donovan's motel room and finds him napping.
Jesus Christ. I almost shot you in the goddamn face.
Now we're even.
What's funnier is finding out that Vietnam veterans actually do this to each other.
Next time, don't let me catch you napping.
Kiss my ass.
Alex Hernandez delivered a fantastic performance, able to effortlessly bring out mournfulness, remorse, rage, joy. Anything that called for any emotion, he was able to deliver expertly, and he really showed off that he was capable of doing a lead performance. In fact, I hope that Alex Hernandez plays a lead in another game soon, because what he did for Mafia 3 was great. I feel like a lot of attention was given for the lead performances. I don't think for the NPCs, like the enemy shooters, was given as much attention. I feel like Crispin Freeman. Crispin Freeman's a great actor, but he was 1/10 of the people I killed in Mafia 3. It reached the point where I call Mafia 3 the game Crispin Freeman yells racial slurs at you.
Along with Crispin, there's a lot of enemies voiced by two actors that pull up a gravelly old voice, and another that's an uppity nasal voice. Each of them were guaranteed to be in every firefight. While it's not surprising that a majority of Mafia 3's actors aren't Southerners, I found most of the attempts at Southern accents convincing. Granted, I'm from South Texas, so I suppose anything remotely sounding like it's from New Orleans will convince me. The one accent I found very convincing was during a Native Son segment where Remy Duvall interviews Hollis Dupree.
Well, they wasn't there. They're not here in New Bordeaux. We got a different situation with our colors.
That right there sounded like a real freaking Cajun. Despite that, research I've done into the game has me raising at least a couple of eyebrows at the voice direction. While I praised Barry O'Rourke's acting and I don't have an issue with his performance, it's important to bring up how he's from Sligo, and his character immigrated from Belfast, meaning he's imitating an accent from the other side of his country.
I'm going to have the entrecote. My lady friend here, I'll decide for her in just a moment. But I want my steak extra well done. Burn it.
Pursuing luxury sports cars this go around. You'll find them in your wealthier neighborhoods, but don't take them lightly just because they got soft hands. Most of these bastards are connected to Marcano, so be prepared for a bit of pushback.
If you're not aware that Ireland has different accents for every other street, you'd probably be alright with his attempt at Belfast, but I can imagine if you're from Belfast, you must be wondering what the hell they were thinking.
The other accent that the game attempts to portray are Haitian accents. Now, real-life Haitian accents are derived from French and West African accents, which, when African slaves were taken from West Africa to Saint Dominique, the then colony of Haiti. How Mafia 3 attempts to portray those accents are a very odd attempt at French, Creole, and Jamaican accents attempting to be French.
Boss says if we have to burn down half the hollow to get to Sammy, we're doing it. Ain't stopping till that old man's dead.
It's not a great it's not great representation of Haitian accents, and probably like one of the few blemishes the game has. The only decent Haitian accent is from Emmanuel, and
a shipment of weed is being delivered down in the bayou. Get a boat, use it to bring everything back.
That's it.
Fucking Haitians.
Another thing that Mafia 3 does excellent is editing its cutscenes. Editing is a major part of video games, movies, and television shows, and I really admire the editing that it does. It's nothing spectacular, but the shots that do make you pay attention. It's not a simple, boring shot and reverse shot. In fact, one of my favorite scenes of the game is the final cutscene with Sal Marcano and Lincoln Clay, where the scene is centered around them passing a glass of liquor between each other, and I find that to be both fascinating and somewhat beautiful.
For most scenes, while it does follow basic shot, reverse shot, I think they were at least smart when making the cuts between characters, and at least got the right angles of the models. Video games often choose mocap as it takes a lot of the cost of animating realistic humans off the animators. It's not a perfect solution, but it's shown to be a reliable tool in bridging acting and animation into one. While it wasn't successful in making movies, as Bob Zemeckis can rant to you about, mocap has found its way into video games. I encourage you to watch a behind-the-scenes video of Lane Compton recording the last cutscene of the game, as there are some nuances in Compton's acting that mocap wasn't able to capture. Mafia 3 is framed as a sort of documentary, with missions having accompanying documentary footage. Donovan throughout the game is being interviewed by a Senate committee in a series of flash-forwards, and he elaborates before the committee how the stunts Lincoln will pull off are accomplished. For what could have been standard expository dialogue, the developers attempted to do something interesting, even if it didn't involve gameplay. An FBI agent named McGuire provides commentary, often condemning Lincoln's actions despite having some sympathy for the tragedy that plagued him. What's especially interesting is that for some missions, when the player fails in a certain way, there will be a cutscene where McGuire will either be confused on how that shouldn't have happened, or go into detail on how Lincoln was killed or failed because of some other factors. I didn't see these myself, I had to look them up on YouTube, and I wish there were more missions that offered alternative cutscenes. But alternative cutscenes besides, one of the more interesting things in Mafia 3 does with it is depending on the order of how you accomplish things, it can drastically change how cutscenes will happen. For example, if you kill Tommy Marcano last, Sal Marcano will be especially more mournful about what's happening and be more solemn with Georgie. If you kill Lou last, he'll just not give a shit. Nonlinear storytelling still has a long way to go, but I think this was a neat way of trying to bridge player choices and the story.
You see? We, you, me, him. We're all connected. Do you see light trails? Whoa. This is some crazy shit. See you at Sunday Mass.
Ain't this a bitch? If I would have known this was a clan meeting, I wouldn't have taken this motherfucking gig.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
God damn.
Right on, right on.
Now that we've gone on about Mafia 3's story and presentation for a while, we could discuss the gameplay, and while there is a lot to the gameplay, it has an unfortunate side effect that the game is not as interesting as Mafia 3's world and themes.
Mafia 3 is a Grand Theft Auto clone, meaning you traverse an open-world city on foot or by cars. You engage in hand-to-hand combat and third-person shooting and activate missions. The gameplay is fine. I like how Lincoln controls and he shoots well, but the driving controls are less than to be desired. Whenever you make a hard turn, you drift across the road and slam into another car. It makes it so you're required to use the slow-mo driving ability whenever you make a turn. For every district, there are 2 rackets with an enforcer running it. You have to wreck every racket to draw the enforcer out before you confront him and either kill him or recruit him. Wrecking the racket includes killing key men in the operation, destroying materials for the racket, or recruiting informants. While this is a solid gameplay loop, the problems come when Mafia 3 asks you to repeat that loop 9 times. At a certain point, the game becomes too repetitive for its own good, and at that point it comes down to major events in the game's narrative or set pieces to break up the monotony. But those set pieces still boil down to shootouts.
I say that, but I can't deny that it's very exciting to go on to a riverboat and killing a whole bunch of mobsters and all of that, and let's not forget raiding the clan gathering and not letting one of those cracker assholes escape with their life. And also, credit where credit is due, I think that the level design in Mafia 3 was pretty impressive at points. There were a number of times where I found entrances to bathhouses that let me get into the roof so I could kill the racket boss, and there were also points where you could go in through the canal and go through underground tunnels. Like, there were multiple points. Highlights for me, I think, was the train yard. I thought that had like the most openings in the area, but that was present throughout all of it. It's just I lacked the foresight to find them in the first place.
Mafia 3 as a shooter, things play well. The AI for enemies is fairly intelligent during firefights. When they sense they have the upper hand, they will bum rush Lincoln, but this is the extent of their strategies. It's no Last of Us to be sure, but it makes an effort. But when stealth is utilized, it's an entirely different story. No joke, stealth cripples this game's challenge. If you have a silenced pistol and you keep an eye out, you should more often than not be able to mop the floor with the blood of the mob, and they're none the wiser. It reaches a point of ridiculousness. The Metal Gear games had a way of dealing with players who silently slaughtered all the guards. The overseers would notice that they weren't getting a response from their men and would send reinforcements. While there is a system in place for a backup when a sentry notices you and breaks for a phone, it would have added some tension for stealth players who might want to play smarter instead of lethally. Another of the game's weaknesses is that Lincoln can only carry 2 weapons at a time, which wouldn't be terrible if he wasn't forced into carrying a pistol at all times. So, I missed out on a lot of games during the 7th generation of consoles, which means I also missed the 2 guns only trend, if you can call it that. Maybe this is more annoying to me than it would be to you, who've played more shooters with the same limit, and if so, then good God, that must have been the most annoying shit to go through. Only choosing one type of gun for shootouts severely limits your strategy. What if I wanted a shotgun and a rifle? No, I have to choose either or. I can't just dump the shitty pistol. If you're going to give me 2 guns, at least let me choose what gun I have for both.
But beyond that, there isn't really much to discuss with Mafia 3's gameplay. In fact, if you wanted to, you could label Mafia 3 as a generic open world pseudo stealth shooter with some mildly interesting things under the hood to talk about, but, let's highlight them for the sake of it. I think the police had some very interesting mechanics. For starters, if you commit a crime in a black neighborhood, the dispatch, really will not care. In fact, they just if you had time, go check it out, maybe. But if you commit, a crime in a white neighborhood like Frisco Fields, the police will be on your ass. It's with tanks, machine guns. But it is an interesting mechanic. You utilize tying story and gameplay together and utilizing racism as a mechanic.
What's also interesting is the range of which police will chase you. If they're right behind you, then their sphere of patrol will follow you. However, once you lose the cops and flee from their sphere, police will not follow you, and eventually they'll give up the chase. This removes a lot of frustration I have with Grand Theft Auto in particular. Here, they're not omniscient and will hone in on you for shooting a pistol looking for you. While this does erase some of the tension, and it could use some tweaking like the search areas being bigger, it allows the player to have car chases and to avoid the police just as easy. Another gameplay feature that's an improvement over Grand Theft Auto is the drive-by shooting. You're able to take out a weapon and fire manually, but when you're in a car battle, the game will give you a variety of targets to cycle through. The tires and headshots seem to work best when taking hits out, but I can imagine that taking out trucks on a patrol requires blowing out their engines or gas tanks. While this is an improvement over GTA where you have to multitask several tasks that are already multitasking, this just cuts out the middleman. I don't think video games have yet to develop a game with fun drive-by shooting mechanics. The older GTA games had a mechanic where by turning the camera with the shoulder triggers, your character would unload his gun onto whatever side the camera was focused on. This does mean you're not seeing where you're going, but you didn't have to worry about adjusting your aim since it remained consistent. Maybe I haven't played enough open world shooters to see if they have perfect drive-by shooting, or at least an evolution of what GTA offers, and if so, let me know in the comments. But if not, then it's up to developers that if they're going to continue giving us open world games, then it's up to them to fine-tune a mechanic that's long since grown stale.
For the last part of the gameplay that I want to cover, which I consider to be the most interesting, is with assigning districts. Now, when you complete a district, you can assign it to one of your underbosses, and your underbosses will therefore give you a whole bunch of upgrades to your character.
Cassandra gives you access to a mobile weapons store which you can call at any time, and a person who can cut phone lines for a short while so the police won't be called. A gunsmith works for her that will grant better accuracy, reload speed, and more ammo allowance. Burke will then provide an explosives expert, an insider who will bribe cops to ignore you, and a guy who will bring you one of your cars. Eventually, if he's given enough pull, having Burke will allow you to jack a car without setting off an alarm, and even stealing it from an active driver without a fuss. Vito's people can give you a hit squad for shootouts, a driver who deposits your cash into a vault with collecting dues, and lastly, just a person who lets you see all the enemies inside without wiretapping the building. Vito's upgrades are more about health and stamina, and through him you can max out your health upgrades. The way you can access all of these upgrades paths is through assigning rackets and districts. You're allowed to assign rackets of the same district to different underbosses. For instance, if you want to get another health bar but you also wanted more stability with your aim, you could head to Barclay Mills, give garbage to Vito, and give the trains to Cassandra. Bada bing, bada boom, you have both upgrades. However, once you assign a district, that underboss gets all the rackets, so if you give Barclay Mills to Cassandra, Vito will lose that on it and you lose that upgrade. Conversely, you'll also receive another upgrade from Cassandra.
And let's not forget, these are crime bosses. Greedy, selfish bastards. They want their districts, and they want them now.
Well, there is a grace period to how long they'll wait for a handout. If you hold out on them for too long, they will go after Lincoln and they'll have to put them down. This is a very interesting mechanic that can have huge consequences for you along with great benefits. Depending on player choice, you can make a great impact on the story, even missing out on side quests along the way. Assigning districts has the potential to be a great way of blending story and gameplay together.
But here's the thing. There's 9 districts and 3 underbosses. Do basic math.
The consequences of assigning districts, which is arguably the most interesting mechanic Mafia 3 has, can be circumvented if you evenly spread the districts around, which is a player choice, but it doesn't give the player tough decisions. The only way I could see a player having to kill an underboss is if they leave one alone for too long and they go rogue. In addition, the max upgrades for each underbosses are often unnecessary. Assigning districts could have been more mechanically stressful if the consequences were more prevalent, if there was greater pressure on Lincoln and the player. Maybe each lieutenant has a different stake at each district, or even getting pissed off if they're assigned to a particular district. If you gave Burke Barclay Mills, he could be pissed off about it and go, "Why the hell are you giving me this buckwater shithole?" Conversely, you could give districts to one they really want, like Cassandra could really want Frisco Fields, and if given, she could say, "I appreciate you allowing my men into Frisco Fields. Now that we've got a foot in their door, we're one step closer to dismantling the establishment." The sky was the limit, and Mafia 3 could have elevated itself just from this mechanic alone. Otherwise, it's just a compelling gimmick. Harsh, especially seeing how there was thought put into it, but even with simple shit, you have to take the mechanics as far as they'll take you. And unfortunately, the developers at Hangar 13 didn't take assigning districts as far as it could have gone. It would be a disservice if I didn't mention the amount of technical issues Mafia 3 is plagued with.
You want a drink?
Alright. I wasn't able to capture on camera, but there were a number of times where the sky would glitch up for a few seconds before going back to normal. There were times where an enemy corpse was standing in the air like he was strewn up on a string. One time I was sailing a boat through the waters when it acted like it was on solid land and flipped over, failing the mission for me. And the one I found most egregious, there was a glitch where after finishing a cutscene, the game would not load the missions the cutscene was supposed to spawn, and the cutscene itself replayed 3 times. I had to restart the game in order for the missions to load. This happened twice. It would be inaccurate to say that these sorts of bugs happen all the time, but it would even be more inaccurate to say Mafia 3 isn't a buggy game. It reached a point where fans compiled an entire wiki page of bugs that happened consistently. I can assume that there are mods on PC that fix the bugs, but it's ridiculous that the game was allowed to be shipped out without more time spent on bug tests and fixes. Could this have been due to crunch time wearing down on developers? Not sure, but it's something to think about if you're considering getting this game. It's also something to hold against Hangar 13 and 2K games. Hell, you should still hold this against them, because apparently their remake and remaster for their first 2 Mafia games respectively have their own slew of problems, with slowdown and other bugs. Even the definitive edition of Mafia 3 has its own problems. I can only hope that their games can get better about bugs once we eradicate crunch culture with Molotov cocktails.
The developers of Mafia 3 sought out to create a world where the player experiences the racisms that Black Americans experienced in the 1960s and have echoed feelings of today and have mostly succeeded. However, this came at the cost of having mediocre and middling gameplay, a great mechanic with assigning districts that is not taken as far as it could, enough bugs to make Todd Howard blush, and a story, while great, does not revolve itself around the civil rights movement. Despite all of that, I still find myself recommending this game. I really admire what the story did, and I guess the attempt at what Mafia did is what I admire so much about it. I mean, we're still in an age where video games touch a contentious topic and they're immediately controversial. Films and graphic novels have passed us by for years, and books by 10 country miles, but I digress. I think Mafia 3 should be admired for what it did and what it attempted to do. We should look to future games to further the art of video games and to further the voices of Black people, because that's what's important and that's what elevates art, if it gives voices to the people. And to close this video out, I want to give recommendations and shoutouts to several Black creators.
Satchel Drakes. This man's video on Chrono Cross is one of the best I've ever seen, and it has influenced how I approach music as a critic. He seems to be more focused on his music career and general production though. Ashisaurus. She's an artist who draws a variety of anime and cartoon characters along with personas. 18+ though. Alfred Coleman, aka Paperbox House. This man is responsible for Eggman pissing on the moon. He's a great voice actor, and also a storyboard artist who worked on Unikitty. He streams on Twitch and is developing a cartoon pilot. While his Twitter isn't explicit, he's mandated that it's 18+. Jake Neutron. He's an acquaintance of mine who works on Friday Night Funkin' mods and focuses on whatever he's hyper-fixated on. Zeppy. An online artist on Twitter and Tumblr. I'm a big fan of her work, both safe for work and not safe for work. You should check it out. Once accidentally called her out for long fingernails. Star Pirate. She's an artist, and her along with her partner, Bunchata, work on VTuber models. Man of 1,000 Thoughts. He makes videos about various works in animation. He interviewed Amphibia, and I really enjoyed his video on Coonskin. The Black Hokage. I've only checked out his Mafia 3 video, but he makes videos on a wide variety of topics related to video games, so he seems cool. Zentagon. He's another acquaintance. He reviews and does editorials on anime. Mars Reviews, a cartoon reviewer. I really dug his video on The Cleveland Show, but he's been inactive for a while. Todd Cameron. He used to be Rated S Games and made some solid videos that I recommend watching. His focus is production on Peanut Butter Gamers videos nowadays. Bob Dunga. She makes the videos on a variety of games. She's covered the once-thought-lost Mean Girls DS game. SBN3, Soul Brother Number 3, or Max. He's made the How to Be an Online Voice Actor series, which is an invaluable resource if you're looking to get into the art form. He's also directed Taste Clothes, which is really funny, and Class of '09, a parody of visual novels. He does workshops for $80 as well if you want tutorials for filmmaking. Del the Funky Homo Sapien. He is my favorite hip-hop artist. If you want to get into hip-hop, check out Del. I wish my brother George was here, has a lot of bangers. His work on Handsome Boy Modeling School is great, but Deltron 3030 is one of the best albums I've ever heard in my life. Check it out. Ian Jones Cordy, a storyboard artist on Steven Universe and the creator of OKKO, which is super fucking charming and cute. Howard Jones, lead singer of Light the Torch and formerly Killswitch Engage. His vocals are some of my favorite in the heavy metal genre. LaShawn Thomas, creator of Cannon Busters on Netflix, which is really good and worth checking out. Spike Lee. I haven't seen all of his films, but I really love Black Klansman. It made me a leftist. Michael J. White, an actor and martial artist. He was in The Dark Knight, but I know him more for Black Dynamite. This film is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen, and his show's good too. I'm also going to link a few videos done by the Black Hokage recommending black gamers and streamers. Link in the description. And lastly, this is a list of games IGN put out that were made by black developers. Check them out if they look cool to you. Who knows, I might make videos about these too.
I'll have a link to their social medias in the descriptions. And if you have any creators that you want to plug, or hell, you want to plug yourself, please feel free to do so in the comment sections. And going forward, I feel like we need to listen to black voices. If I haven't made it obvious in this video, we still live in a society that treats black people poorly. There's systemic racism, and racial bigotry is running more rampant than ever. But I believe things can get better. Human beings have a knack for it. And as we get there, I want to thank you for coming. Thank you for staying. Thank you for watching the show. And power to the people.
I'm gonna be waiting for you, Lincoln Clay. This won't be the last time we see each other.
I know.
I'll have a link to their social medias in the description. Motherfucker, and I just forgot what I had to say.
When do I start walking back again?
What?
When do I start walking back?
It's very short, Hayden. Like, that was it. Like...
And while we're at the fucking point of Arc 7, Rem fucking sucks ass. Like, she's a fucking dumb cunt, and I hate her. Because, like, she's just terrible and bad, and just treats Subaru
Goodbye.
like